going on, guys? This is the Man Cave Hobby Show. What the show is basically we're going to be going over a bunch of different people I'm going to try to bring in. We're going to go over their hobbies, their excitements, their memories, what they've learned, what they've lost, kind of all kinds of fun stuff that they can teach us from the hobbies they do and exciting things they've done. We're starting off with this episode with a good friend of mine. He's won a lot of competitions. He's been doing this hobby since I was literally born. He's a good friend of mine and my Uncle Tim. What's going on today?
How you doing, Kyler? Thanks for having me.
Man, thanks for coming out. I knew that you would be a perfect person to start this kind of podcast because the memories you and my dad go over, it's incredible. I get excited and listen to it, especially my dad. He can ramble on for days, and I know with how long you've been doing it. So in the family, I've been always been told that you're the hobbyist. You're kind of the guy that you've jumped around from hobby to hobby to hobby, doing it all 100% like all the Mullaney's do. We don't just hop into a hobby and do the baseline stuff. We're kind of a go big or go home kind of family.
100% or don't do it.
That's right. But fishing has been a hobby that you've been doing for longer than I've been alive, and you've really stuck with it over the last couple of years. You've been really digging hard and well performing in the local area. Why fishing? I know I do a little bit of airsoft. You got me in airsoft. You've done a little bit of cars, a little bit of lifting. You still do lifting, but why fishing?
Fishing. Let's see. As you get older, you still want to compete and be competitive, so it's a good way to do that. The other reason being is it's the challenge of fishing. Bass fishing is one of the most difficult but most fun I have because there's a lot of pressure and there's little to none depending on how you look at it. There's fun fishing when I take my son, and there's also serious fishing where the night before you're about to go crazy trying to get everything ready and spending large amounts of money, to say the least, on this and that. And with bass fishing, there's such a wide range of tools, toys, colors, scents that it just keeps you going.
So you say bass fishing, and my dad wanted me to ask this because when I was talking to him about these things, and he said, "Hey, you got to ask him why bass fishing." I was like, I thought it's fishing. I didn't know it's bass fishing. Why just bass fishing? Why do you specialize in that?
Bass fishing is the most competitive fishing out there, as far as I'm concerned, that I know of. Don't get me wrong. There's ocean fishing. There's everything else like that. But where we live right now, there's got to be 6 to 8 lakes minimum, big time lakes that we can fish, and that's pretty much why I go with that. But pretty much when I was working at GE, a friend of mine on the press named Keith Kamak, I've always enjoyed fishing. I'll go back as far as, Brother Steve used to we used to go to Fawn Lake and fish at his apartment. And it was just something that I enjoyed doing, throwing a worm out there and just relaxing in the excitement of catching fish and reeling it in. And you caught something, and sometimes you just don't catch nothing. But it's good to get out in nature and do something other than sitting inside.
So who got you into fishing? Is that my dad, or?
Well, I'd say your dad did it first because taking me pond fishing from Fawn Lake to apartment to apartment. They lived in a few apartments, and they always had some type of pond or something like that we'd fish in. So I give him the credit at first. We also, when I was really, really young, we used to fish at Pedos Pond. It was a little pond, and man, we used to have like a stick and tie a rope to it and catch bluegill. So that was pretty much where it started. But after that, Keith Kamak on the press, he took me one time. He says, "Man, you got to go fishing." I said, "Well, I've been fishing, stuff like that." Because I even go back a little bit even farther. Not as far, that far, but Jonathan Butts, when I used to be like a teenager, we'd take fishing rods and we'd go fishing, salmon fish and everything else up in Rocky River.
This is all in like Ohio?
This was up in Ohio, yeah. This was up in Ohio where we would just try to catch something. A lot of smallmouth and stuff like that. So it was just fun. Never took it very competitive. Just loved doing it. Being out in the nature and just getting out of the house instead of being cooped up. So
do you remember your first fish you ever caught?
Yes, actually. I was at Pedos Pond as a bluegill.
Bluegill?
It was a little baby bluegill, and I caught it, and nobody was around. And at that time, I hated touching fish. It took me forever, believe it or not, until probably 7 years ago, where I don't care about touching a fish, but I don't like touching fish. It's the craziest thing. I bass fish, and everybody's like, "What are you doing?" So that was my first one on a bluegill, and then finally everyone came over, and Steve took it off, and I think I was hooked from there because it was just so exciting. I was by myself when I caught it too, because everybody else was goofing around, so that was cool. But Keith K-Mac, he's the one that ruined me into fishing. He said, "You want to go fishing?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I don't even know how to throw a spinning rod. I didn't know anything about a bait cast or anything." He goes, "All right, well, come on, let's go fishing." So we went on Lake Hartwell, and he's like, "All right, I want you to take this bait, and when you throw it, you're just going to go jerk, 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 jerk. It's called a topwater bait. It's the most exciting fishing there is," and he's not joking. So we ended up going out there, and within minutes, it was like a bam, 5 pound fish, bam, 5 pound fish, bam, 5 pound fish. I'm like, man, this is awesome. This is that easy. But no, it was like a hook and ladder. It was insane. We probably, with our top 5 fish, we had over 25 pounds, and that's insane amount of fish. So he basically ruined me from there. So from there, I mean, we used to catch some striper too, but just catching the largemouth bass is one of the most exciting things.
So you've been doing how long you been doing the competitive aspect? Like when did you enter your first tournament?
Well, that's actually Keith K-Mac again. He goes, "Man, you want to fish one?" I said, "Yeah." So GE's kind of like your arc. It's a low level, but it's a lot of fun. It's more of a family. It's more of a man fellowship type deal. Everybody knows each other. It's fun to talk a little bit of trash and just have a good time fishing.
They also have like a father-son type of deal, right?
No, you can fish with your son and everything like that as long as somebody's in the boat that works for GE. So Keith took me there, and I'll never forget. It was probably 40 degrees, and I had a pair of shorts on. And Keith said, "What are you wearing?" I said, "Well, it's going to get like 70 degrees today." He goes, "Yeah, but you are going about to die." So we took off in his Ranger boat, probably about 60 miles an hour, and we ran on Lake Greenwood. We started all the way at the bottom, went all the way to the top. It took probably 20-25 minutes. It was so cold I could barely even hold my fishing rod. So he took me all the way up there, but we ended up catching at GE back then. You could fish for perch, striper, whatever it was, but just not catfish. It had to be a game fish. So we ended up winning the whole thing, and I've never been so excited. So like I said, Keith has really been the one that kind of ruined it for me.
Does he still fish?
Yeah, he still fishes. He's doing very, very good. He does a lot higher level than I do. But we ended up winning that tournament, and that day was also crazy because we caught a little bass and then we caught a large bass. Yeah, while we were weighing it, the largemouth ended up trying to eat the little fish. It actually swallowed half of it. And we had to rip them apart in order to weigh the big fish to see if we had big fish, and we ended up having big fish. We won a bunch of money, and it was the greatest thing in the world. And Keith was like, "It's no big deal." So he ruined it. He's ruined a lot for me, but it was all it was all from there.
Yeah, when you're dealing, I was gonna say when you're dealing with that somebody that good who's probably dealt with stuff like that, and I mean,
Yep.
I can understand.
Yeah, he ruined it for me. It's like putting you in a brand new car, and you know what it's beautiful. So he got me into it, and then the following year, I ended up being president of GE Fishing Club because I enjoyed it so much. I think that was a little bit too early in my career, to be honest with you. My wife Jackie, she ended up being like the treasurer, and we were living on Lake Hartwell, so it was good, but it was very, very difficult to jump into it that quick.
So I guess I'll lead into with all these tournaments that you do. What's the process of getting ready? My thought would be is get the boat, fill it up, get some drinks, grab a rod, head out there, and have a way.
I wish it was that easy. No, the night before. Well, normally, if I was better about it, I'd be doing it during the week. But having a family life and kids, it's just you don't have time. So pretty much Friday night, I flip a switch. My wife doesn't mess with me. I stay out in the garage, and Caden, my son, comes out there with me, and he helps me a lot. So he'll goof off, go play when I need him to climb up in the boat, get something, he gets it. And pretty much I'm getting about 18 rods ready to go fishing. So I cut off line, retie, adjust from darker baits to lighter baits, what I think I need to fish, what I don't need to fish with. So I turn on some music out in the garage. It's my little time being out there, getting prepared, making sure everything's at 100% ready to go. No questions asked. So, and nobody wants to talk to me when I'm out there. I'm in my little zone. Don't bother me. I'm not very nice.
So you have everything locked down usually right before it's time to pull away. So it's basically 100% ready, back the truck up.
The only thing, well, pretty much that morning I have to, it's about 45 minutes to get ready to go. I mean, you got to get your cooler ready to go, your drinks, get your coffee, get the boat ready, as in you got to, I put it in the garage, so I don't have a terribly whole lot. So you got to put the engine up, get everything like that. But believe it or not, Caden gets up at 4 in the morning. He helps me. It's crazy. He's never missed it. Never ever has he ever missed it. He's always helped me in the morning. Sometimes I haven't woken him up. I've let him sleep because if he went to bed late or something like that. But every time we win money in a tournament, he gets $20 when I come back because he's always helping me. And matter of fact, it's really good. Even when I pull the boat in after whatever happens and we bring the boat home, everybody comes out and helps me put it up. It's really nice.
Oh, that
That
sounds
I
nice.
do like about it.
So can you have anybody more on the boat? Are you like only two people, or like could Caden come along with the two people and just hang out?
No, they said no. It's only two. They
Okay.
said they think it's an advantage or something like that. But I've talked to him about it. If there was ever an emergency, Caden had to go. But Caden's old enough now. I don't have to. But two people in the boat. That's it.
Gotcha. So had you were kept rambling on about. I say rambling is all this is awesome, but I wanted to ask. I apologize. I forget. So when it comes to your tools, so you're talking about the rods and reels and lures and everything like that. What does it take? Like, can you just grab a baseline rod and go to the store and you
No.
be competitive? Because I know Grandpa he caught a big I think it was a big striper on a Barbie rod.
That was a catfish.
Was it
actually. I heard
catfish?
it was a huge catfish. No, believe it or not, fish as intelligent and as dumb as they are too. I mean, if you throw a live bait out there, that somebody's going to eat it. But the bass are a whole lot smarter. They swim. They have a whole personality in themselves. Like a catfish is kind of like. Don't get me wrong. There's catfish people that take it to another level too. But bass fishing's more of a competitive thing. I think they're harder to catch. They move. They constantly with the weather, everything like that. But to go to the fishing rods, no. Each individual rod carry pretty much one type of rig. In other words, a spinnerbait. I have a spinnerbait rod and a spinning bait and a bait caster that's meant for a spinnerbait. So it could range you from $300 to $500 depending on how much you spend rod reel combo. And then you have to sit there like basically I went to Bass Pro Shop and I went to a bunch of shops and I spent probably $300 just to buy every spinnerbait that was out there for me to finally figure out which one I like, which one I have the confidence in, what works the best. Pretty much the most consistent one I got. Now I can adapt to it, colors and stuff like that, but pretty much I figured out which one catches me the most fish because there's so many things that people put out there that just it looks good and all this other stuff and it doesn't work with two craps. So you're spending that amount of money and then you got jigs, you got different colors, size, weights, and then of course you get into your lines, monofilament, fluorocarbon, braid, and it just goes on and on. I think that's what makes it the best part about it is trying to figure out the best combination and what works for you.
So is it what works for you or what works with the lake or the fish? Like, do you have to change it from lake to lake that you go to on what you're using?
Colors, weights, yes. It depends. If a lake's really shallow, then you're going to fish a little bit different. If it just rained and it's really dirty, then of course you're going to want some like fluorescence and stuff like that so they can see it. Like we just fished Lake Kiwi recently, and basically you're fishing with clear. You want fluorocarbon because you can't see it. You want clearer baits because you don't want darker baits. You want to match the hatch, as they call it. You want it to look like the bait. And what really excites me, my cranking has not been good in the last couple of years. Well, I kind of figured it out and found one that I really, really like and really enjoy. And I think that's really going to change the game on that. Like I have my favorite jigs. I have my favorite spinner baits. I have my favorite this, favorite that. And the one thing that I've been lacking is crankbaits. And I finally found it. I'm really excited about that because that's a lot of fishing too is crankbaiting.
Gotcha. So the success is by the device you use, so the lures you use, but it also if it works for you. So you have to find both what the fish are actually biting and also what is actually working, or is it just like, hey, it's working for me, so that's what I'm going to use?
No, it's not really about me. It's what the fish is, what they need, how you match the hatch and everything like that. So it's, when I say for me, in other words, some people like a stiff rod, some people like a harder a loose rod and this and that. Like some people are like, man, you're crazy fishing that. And I'm like,
Is that like the flex?
yeah, the flex.
Okay.
In other words, some are stiffer. Like if I fish my jig, I want something with a good tip on it that has a lot of flex, but I want a whole lot of backbone. So when you set the hook, because the hook's huge on a jig, you're going to want to set the hook and you're going to have to rip it through their face. But when you're like some baits, like we'll say a chatterbait, somebody's like, are you serious? You're throwing that light of a rod? And I'm like, yep, I haven't lost one yet. So it's really it's time on the water, it's learning, it's observing, and it's honestly sitting on YouTube for many hours studying. Because a lot of people are paid to say stuff, And you have to figure out, really, are they getting paid to do this, say this, and to sell this
Hmm.
to make their money, or they really mean it?
That's a lot of the things I watch. Not just YouTube, like you said. YouTube is such information. Like back then, it was like, hey, I'm gonna go on the Google or Webster, and you learn this and learn that. But YouTube is just the learning center. Like it's so much easier to visually learn on there. So exactly what you're talking about is I watch all kinds of videos on cameras and equipment, and this, that, whatever, and you're like, is it really that good, or they just get sponsored? Because a lot of the big people, and probably same thing as fishing, is they get sent equipment and say, hey, I need you to advertise for this,
Yep,
and you don't know if it's really as good as they say, or
correct.
so.
No, you have to weed through all that. I mean, if you watch, the worst part is if you watch your Saturday or Sunday morning bass fishing shows, they're selling stuff. They're selling the colors, the scents, and all this and everything like that. But man, YouTube's ruined a lot of secrets for a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
because they want the views, so they're going to put it out there. So you can really learn a lot. I mean, it's no different than a lot of people have become mechanics just by watching YouTube. Watch YouTube, you know how to fix a car.
The
Not completely, but at least enough.
Yeah, enough. And that's the thing is when it comes to, well, like you're talking about, is the people on TV, they are trying to sell the stuff. Even YouTube has their people that they're sending sponsorships to. I see it all the time. Is I'm getting this equipment, but I'm going to give my honest opinion. You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
But the funny part is when the lower views you get, when you start getting the people that paid for their equipment,
Yep.
you get the honest answers, and that's where you find out if it's
Right.
if
So you got to distinguish. I mean, KVD, the most famous fisherman out there, he's selling stuff. He's not really, nah, he's got secrets. But you got these other YouTubers that are busting their butt and they're putting out really good stuff, but you got to go find them. I mean, Tactical Basson's probably one of my favorites. I think they tell the honest truth, but the problem is they fish like Arizona, really clear California type water. So it's you have to dictate and all that other stuff and figure it out. But they do travel a whole bunch and they fish those lakes. So you end up following the people that you really trust and see how it works. And then you go buy stuff. A lot of times I'll buy everything in twos because half of it I'm either going to lose it, it's going to break off, or it won't work. I mean, crud, I forget how much this jerkbait was. It might have been $26 a piece. And I bought one. I bought two different types, a deep one and a shallow one. And I went to go cast it, and it shattered completely when I hit the trolling motor. And I'm like, what a piece of crap! But the thing will fish. It'll catch fish.
wow.
That's for sure. And they actually used it on the bass. Believe it or not, on the Bassmaster, Hank Cherry ended up using it, and they were looking at it because a lot of those people, when they fish those, they're hiding it. They don't want everybody to know what they're fishing with because they're going to go fish the hole when they're fishing.
Yeah.
So you got to really pay attention. Some people are pretty smart in what's going on, but I ended up finding it. But man, I broke that thing, and that thing was the biggest piece of crap, but it will catch some fish.
That was gonna be my next question. Is what? How much have you lost in the time you've been? We'll narrow it down to the last 2 years. Let's go.
Oh, well, I'm actually more efficient in the last 2 years. I'm really efficient. But to be honest with you, before then, it's awful. Like somebody caught it was one of my favorite rods, and my buddy who I was fishing with, he caught a fish. So I set my rod down and I put it underneath the, where you tie it on the hook, whatever you call that, to where you tie up the boat.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
The
I
anchor?
stuck, no, not the anchor. It's the not the,
T.
whatever. So I stuck it underneath
I
that.
don't know nothing about boats.
I can't remember what it's called right now. So, anyways, where you tie off to the ramp or to the dock. So, anyways, I set it underneath there, and I went and helped him. I went and picked up my rod, cracked it in half. So, and not only that, you're gonna step on rods. Like Brother Steve's a little bit clumsy sometimes when he comes up front, and he'll step on the eye holes. So you're bending those back, and you're trying not to break them. Because man, there's a couple rods I got that are really, really expensive. They don't need to be bent back, and then you end up snapping eye holes off, and pretty much that rod's about gone. But there are good people, if you look on Facebook and stuff like that are around here that'll actually fix them for you.
Oh, that's nice.
So you start a little community and stuff like that. So
That's what I was gonna. I thought 2 years would be a good idea, just because as you've progressed, that you've gotten better with your stuff. I know that with any of my equipment, even the airsoft stuff, I was breaking everything because I was trying to build my own stuff and everything like that. So it took a trial and error.
You gotta take your bumps and stuff like that, just like anything else. I mean, you end up buying the cheaper rod, and you got a big old fish and it snaps, or you didn't learn how to tie your line to the lure, or you didn't use a palmetto and you used 50 knots. It doesn't matter; it'll untie. I mean, if you look at Adria's husband, He had a big old fish. What happened? Came off. No palmetto knot or anything like that. So he lost a 5 pounder. It sucks, but you got to take your bumps and bruises in order to figure out what's going on.
So what are all the lakes that you mainly fish at, like with these tournaments as is?
Mostly the Savannah chain, which is going to be Lake Kiwi, Hartwell, Russell, Clarks Hill, Greenwood, Succession. I'm trying to think what other ones. But that's pretty much the main ones right there.
So which one's your favorite lake to fish at?
Oh, that's always the toughest question. It comes down to season. It comes down to everything like that. But
You fish all year?
oh yeah, always. I hated fishing in the winter, and then I started fishing. The last 2 years, I've been fishing with a friend of mine named Kevin Fowler, and he's on another level too. And he's taught me a bunch, how to fish, when to fish, stuff like that. But he loves fishing in the winter, and I found out that he's right. That's when the big pigs are out there. It's harder to catch. You catch a lot less fish, but that's when you catch the bigger fish. But to answer the lake, probably I hated Lake Succession. They called it Succession, but I learned how to fish it. I actually had shoulder surgery this last year, and me and Brother Steve were meeting up there like every week fishing, and kind of figured it out. And to tell you, it's a bucket list. Kevin Fowler, it was one of our first tournaments. No, it's our second tournament together, if I'm not mistaken. And he's like, "Hey, I got a spot I want to fish," and I'm like, "Oh, I got a spot I want to fish too." And he's like, "All right, cool." So he's like, he goes, "I'm not really sure it is." I said, "I don't know where it is until I go get there." So we pull up on the spot, and he's like, "This is it." And I'm like, "No, this is where I wanted to fish." And it was the same spot, and I was like, "Oh, this is freaking awesome." So he got up there, so he tied up some rods. It took a little bit. So I was throwing a spinnerbait, and we were by this one dock, and I throw a couple times, and he starts heading down the thing. And while I backcast, poop, and I feel this just a little dink. And I'm like, oh, I'm hung. And all of a sudden I feel a pull, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I bring it in. Kevin's like, calm down. This is February. It's pretty cold out like that. And it ended up being a 7.2. 7-pound, 2 ounce. And I'm like, holy smokes, we're jumping all over the boat. I mean, that's a big old fish.
I was gonna say, from what my dad is saying, like if you're getting 3 4s is like an average what
Yeah.
you're shooting
Well,
for.
actually, I'll say two's an average.
Really?
Yeah. If you get a 3, that's a good fish. If you get a 4, good job.
So 7.2.
7.2 is huge. So I was like, holy smokes, right? So we're jumping around the boat. We're getting the live well ready. We put it in there, and I'm just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So anyway, so we go about 50 to 100 feet farther, and I do the same thing. Throw a back cast, but this time I knew what that tick was, and I set the hook 8.4. We had over 15 pounds of fish in basically 2 casts.
Wow.
Yeah, that's one of those bucket lists. But the crazy part is, this is one of the neatest part about competition fishing. So the whole day I'm like, oh, I know we caught these. I know everyone else did too. There's no way that we did this. So we ended up, I didn't catch a single fish the rest of the day. I went from an adrenaline high to like just exhausted just from the dump. And then Kevin ended up catching the next 3 all day till 3 o'clock. I mean, we had I had the first 2 fish in 15 minutes. 5 fish. 5 fish. With him, honestly, 15 to 20 minutes of that tournament, we had over 15 pounds of fish. It was just ridiculous. And I'm like, oh, we're never going to, and we're talking. It's such a mind game out there when you're fishing. You're like, is it enough? Is it not enough? Did we win? Did we not win? Stuff like that. So I was like, oh, man, it was like the biggest, it was a bigger tournament. It's a little bit bigger than GE. More money in it, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. So we're fishing. He caught the other 3. We come in, and Kevin's like, I don't want to weigh right away. I want to wait. And I'm like, hey, I'm about to throw up, dude. I'm like freaking out. I'm like, oh, my God, you got a guy comes up. He goes, hey, how'd you do? And I'm like, we did okay. Because I didn't know if I should say something or not, I don't want to be cocky. I want to be humble. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm just about to burst.
Well, it's a strategy thing. I mean, even in racing, when we're doing the enduro races, we'll do 8, 10, 12 hours or whatever. And we're like, dude, we got 3 good cards. I said, we're 6 hours in. I said, we're doing good. Somebody comes over. Hey, how you guys? It's all right. We're getting a lot.
You got to play it off. Yeah. But, man, I'm serious. I was about to throw up. I was about to die. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I just caught a 7.2 and an 8.4. And I'm like, holy smokes. So anyway, so they're like, all right, Mullaney, Fowler, we go to weigh in. and we dump it in there, and we're like, pa pa. These two fish come out of there, and everybody's like, good Lord, they were flipping out. I think the closest we had 15, 16, 17, 18 pounds, 18 or 19 pounds,
Uh-huh.
and I think the next closest was like 10. But the whole time I thought, I was like, I think we lost. I didn't think we made it. You just don't know. That's the best part about competitive fishing. You don't know whether, if you went out there and you start slaughtering them. I mean, we got second place at Kiwi this last weekend, and we had 10 pounds of fish, 10-9 or something like that. The whole time I'm out there, I'm like, this ain't enough. And Brother Steve's like, no, this is it. We're in the money. And I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, I'm the worst about that. I just, no, 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 and stuff like that. We ended up getting second place with big fish. It was 3-2 or something like that. So it's cool.
It's funny listening to when my dad comes home because he's all excited because it's just I'm not used to it. I'm used to being on the other side. I'm used to be the one getting excited. I'm used to be the one getting
Yep.
trophies and winning and this, that, whatever. And I know my dad was there because he's been the crew chief for almost my whole life. But I'm just not used to it because I'll be like sitting there and my dad will call me up. Hey, and I'm like, what? He goes, guess how we did? I was like, what? He goes, dude, we got second place with big fish. I was like, dude, that's awesome. He goes, I got some money. And I'm like, dude, to see him so excited over fishing is, I mean, yeah, he's definitely hooked. It's crazy that he works out as a relaxation, but now fishing is his relaxation. He's got both,
Yep.
so he'll just go fish for fun.
How many words do you think we say the whole entire tournament?
That was going to be my next question. I wanted to ask that, but I was trying to lead into it. When you're on the boat, when you're situated, because I deal with this, like I said, the endurance races, we're there, like I've done 12-hour races, and you would think, hey, let's sit down. Hey, what's going on? We can't stop. Like, we're like, all right, what's going on? Where's he at? Has he been on the track yet? Like, we're always doing something, so there's never really just Joe Schmo talking. But I was like, but you guys are fishing. I said, you just casting reels, stuff like that. And I asked my dad, he goes, ain't as much as you think.
No, it's probably like 200 words. I'm serious. There's little to no talking. Hey, what do you think? I don't know. It's just very little. It's just out there. You're together. You're thinking together. You're talking very little. Hey, think we got to move? Sure. Okay. And we move. And we can do this. We do that. There's very, very little talking.
So whenever you go on the lake, especially like you said, Lake Succession, that you guys had that. My thought is whenever you're going to go to the lake, and I'm talking about the Succession because it kind of just hit my brain that, hey, here's our plan. We're going to start off here, then we might travel over here and kind of over there. And if you have places that you think are good, then and you have more on the list, it makes it better. And when you said, hey, I got an idea, he has an idea, so great. And my thought is, so you have two good locations. And then when it turned out to be one, you're like, oh, this is great. I was like, I would have thought that sucked because I was like, you went from two locations to, all right, well, now we're down to one.
Yeah.
So how do you decide where to travel on the lake and what's working, what's not working?
Well, you got to take your bumps and bruises. So you got to start studying maps. You got to start understanding, like, lake levels. There are so many things that involve which way's the wind blowing. Because wind blows bait. So if you're fishing the other side of the lake and the wind's blowing to the other side, probably the bait's on the other side. So you end up just learning that. To be honest with you, it's time on the water, time on that lake to learn where fish are, where you're chasing them, where they're at. If the wind's blowing this way, then they're probably over here. If the wind's blowing this way, they're probably over here. Is the lake up or is the lake low? Is the lake dirty? Is it clear? It's just there's so many different choices because half time, in case you guys don't know, my brother Steve, he's a hyper man. He's pretty loud, love him to death, and he's very talkative. And that's to say the least. But to think that when we go out there and go fishing, we very little talk, it would just blow your mind away. But when we get out there, he trusts me to know